All right, so good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Sarah Husky with 3C Ren. I'm working out of the county of San Luis Obispo. We have Jennifer Rennick and Grant Murphy with us this morning from Imbalance Green Consulting to provide an introduction to the Energy Code. But before diving into that, we will be just running through some intro slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we just ask that everyone make sure that they're on mute throughout the training. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and we'll invite you to unmute yourself. We also will be monitoring the chat box, so feel free to add any questions you have there. Again, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, profession, and where you're joining us from. And then lastly, just for attendance purposes, if everyone can make sure that their screen name is displaying your first and last name, that really helps us with tracking attendance. So a brief introduction of who we are. We are the Tri-County Regional Energy Network, also known as 3C Ren. We are funded by ratepayer dollars through the public goods charge found on utility bills. And the benefit of being ratepayer funded is that there's no cost to those we serve, and we are able to return these dollars back to our local economy, which has historically missed out on some of these funds. So our services have grown from the last year. We now offer 6 programs focused on 3 distinct services. We have incentives, training, and technical support. Our incentive programs are home energy savings and commercial energy savings, which offers incentives for single family, multifamily homes and commercial businesses. We have our training programs, our building performance training and Energy Code Connect, which offers live and on-demand trainings. And through our Energy Code Connect program, we have our Energy Code Coach service, which offers residential and non-residential Title 24, Part 6, Part 11, also known as Cal Green, questions for those projects. And then we have our technical assistant programs, which offers customized audits for critical facilities. That's for our energy assurance services program. And then we have our utility bill reviews and site assessments for farmers through our agriculture energy solutions program. And then since we've now been around for about 5 years or so, we thought we would just highlight some of the achievements that we have achieved. So we have, through 2023, we have trained over 4,000 individuals. We have completed 1,374 energy saving projects. We've answered 334 Title 24 Cal Green questions. And secured 155 million for our Tri-County region through 2028. And with that, I will pass things over to Jennifer.
Sarah, welcome everybody. And I was able to glance over at the chat here and there to get an idea of where folks are at with kind of broad brush, I thought, overview of the code, and folks that are new to the code or need kind of a refresher or a better understanding of how the energy code is now organized, because it is organized a bit differently than the other parts of the building code. And one thing we've learned over the years is, even for folks who've been working with a lot of codes in their architecture practice, they don't necessarily know how or where our energy code fits into place with the bigger selection of titles and regulations in California. So we're going to try and set the stage for that and give you an idea about why we have an energy code and a little bit about how it's organized. So we're going to start out with a little bit of historical context, and then talk a little bit about the energy code in that context, and then review the process of how our energy code comes in a 3-year cycle. And then we'll take a closer look at how you might apply some parts of the energy code, but look at the energy code and how it is kind of laid out and organized. And then we'll give you some resources for that. I'm joined also by Grant Murphy, who is here to monitor the chat and answer questions. And with that, we'll get started. So, with the historical context, a lot of this started really in the 1950s, 1960s, but then it kind of comes to a head in the 1960s with the energy crisis that we had in California and also in the rest of the country. So there was an oil embargo in 1973. And so there was a limited supply of gas. Like, I barely remember this as a kid, seeing this happen. And I know a lot of folks that are learning about the energy code now, this would be something you would ask, the folks older than you about. But this was a wake-up call to many people in the United States that we as a country need to pay attention on where our energy comes from, how we use our energy, and how to not be wasteful of energy. So some of the things they did is like have cars drive slower, reduce the speed limit. Famously, Jimmy Carter told everyone to put on a sweater, and he had solar panels installed on the roof of the White House. After that kind of wake-up call, there were a lot of very intelligent people who started to really look at how much energy do we use in our country, how much energy do we use in California, and well-known physicists became part of the California Energy Commission, was on the board, and started to kind of map out for the rest of us, like looking at how much energy per capita does California use compared to the United States, but also compared to other states. And the reasoning behind this was he was trying to make the case that California, starting in the 70s, started to really look at energy consumption in our buildings and transportation and as a state. And because of those regulations, California was able to limit or kind of level off the amount of energy per capita that we were using and really show how much money that was saving the state, and also tie that back to big reductions in air pollution. So even now, California, although we have one of the largest states, and we consume as a state, because it's so populated, a large amount of energy, still in 2022 we were ranked third lowest per capita energy consumption in the US. Hawaii does a little bit better than us, for example, and we're able to level off that energy use. And then part of those building codes was our energy codes. And through that energy code, we could reduce wasteful and unnecessary energy through a set of standards. And so this is an example of a project that was one of the first multifamily platinum LEED buildings. And really what this project showed is that you could incorporate enough solar panels on a roof to offset 90% of the electricity needed for all of these tenants. And at this time, it was still the most common to use natural gas for their water heating. But as far as it came for the space heating and other electricity, you could see that it could be done with solar panels. And then our energy code has gone up from there, as well as exemplary examples have gone up from there. So 1978 was when we had our first energy code, and we refer it to as like Title 24, but it's the Energy Code Part 6 of Title 24. And then 2008, we started to develop an energy efficiency strategic plan for the state. So soon thereafter, 2010, we have another part of Title 24, Part 11, and that's the Cal Green Code. And then in 2020, with the implementation of our 2019 Energy Code, we started to require photovoltaics, solar panels for homes, and then that expanded to the non-residential occupancies in 2023, which is part of our current 2022 Energy Code. Legislation was also passed along the way that requires California to have a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas in the buildings and 100% carbon-free electric generation by 2045. So it's been a steady process, but the California Energy Code has helped bring about California's low per capita energy use and great reduction in pollution, but also saving our state billions of dollars for not having to build new power plants. Although with the shift towards moving towards all electric, we do need to build solar power plants. So the Energy Code encourages heat pump technology, which uses electricity. It's highly efficient. Establish electric-ready requirements for the single-family homes, but expand the PV systems and battery storage requirements, and improve the indoor air quality by strengthening our ventilation standards. That's kind of big picture goals for that Energy Code. And it's a result of really looking at how much energy, how much electricity do our homes and businesses use. And nearly 70% of that electricity in California goes to those buildings and all the uses inside of those buildings. So California has a plan for a clean energy future where a carbon-free electric grid is available. Buildings are increasingly decarbonized. The industrial sector is powered by clean electricity, by clean fuels, also including green hydrogen, and where the transportation choices are zero emissions, and we're able to plug in or charge electric vehicles. So exemplary building, California Air Resources Board wanted to set the example. So they worked on having an operational zero net carbon building. And you can learn more about this in California's transition plan for clean energy. Part of this, and the reason I mention it, is because with the Energy Code, kind of this big picture context is in California, we're moving more and more towards all electric buildings. And as a result, the code needs to follow along with it, but also you're going to see more and more solar panels installed on our buildings, more and more variable refrigerant heat pumps, and small heat pumps for residential use, including for hot water. And we're going to have a way to do that for new construction that you're going to see in the Energy Code. For existing buildings, it's going to be a little more incremental, and the Energy Code also reflects that. So when there's opportunity to replace your heating and cooling system, there's going to be sections of the code on that, including appliances and the possibility of being electric ready for replacing those appliances, more on on-site solar and batteries and envelope improvements. And then also our state as a whole is looking at kind of a big picture infrastructure approach, like a better way to decarbonize the grid itself and to reduce the natural gas carbon footprint. And there are amazing projects going on where hydrogen is being created from the natural gas using excess solar energy, and then feeding that back into our natural gas infrastructure to reduce its carbon footprint, and then, of course, to support electric vehicle and electric vehicle infrastructure. Okay, so that kind of sets this context of where California has been going, and we've been on this path for 50 years now. Now, in terms of the energy code itself, it fits into it fits into California's Code of Regulations. And so there's 28 titles comprising the rules and regulations, and there's about 200 regulatory agencies. Title 24 is the Building Standards Code. And Part 6, the Energy Code, is just a portion of that. Part 11 of Title 24 is the Cal Green Code. But also, back in when this work was being done to look at energy efficiency in buildings, the California Energy Commission also was looking at the energy efficiency of appliances. And so that is under Title 20, which also includes what we use in our buildings, small heating and cooling systems, and all our appliances. And then Title 25, housing and community development, that comes into play, of course, with our housing, but also a lot of talk about ADUs and adding ADUs or manufactured housing. And I have a slide to address that towards the end. The California Code of Regulations. So one of the things I wanted to show you, if you're new to the code, is where you can easily find this. So California has a contract with Westlaw. And so all the California Code of Regulation titles can be found online at westlaw.com/calregs. And you'll see links to all these codes. And if you click on the Title 24 link, that's the only one that's going to take you to a different page. And it's going to take you to the Department of General Services for Building Standards Commission for California. But once you click there and kind of hit their landing page, then you'll be able to click on the Title 24 link. It'll also give you a link to Cal Green as well. And just as a reminder, on the splash page, and you're going to see this as you go to these different websites, they're going to be reminding folks that the new edition of Title 24 will be coming out and be available for folks to start looking at this summer. And then the code becomes effective January 2026. And if you click that link, it's going to take you further down into the website, so you can click on which code cycle you want to look at. And in this case, we'll be talking about 2022, since that is what's currently online now. I mean, active. We're in the 2022 code cycle. So under Title 24, we have 12 parts. Part 7 is reserved right now. But a lot of the things that overlap with the energy code that we do as energy code coaches and help consult on is Part 6, which is specifically the energy code. Part 9, the California Fire Code, as it relates to putting solar panels on a roof and batteries, energy storage batteries around the project. Then you'll need to become aware of Part 9, Fire Code, and then Part 11, the California Green Building Standards, which further the effort towards sustainability, electric car charging, and overlaps or back and forth kind of plays with the energy code. So each of these parts then can be looked at closer. And when you click on Part 6 of the energy code, it's going to take you to the ICC website where you can read the energy code and actually purchase the energy code as PDF or loose, and you can also subscribe to a digital version, basic or premium. And this is kind of the main channel way to access Part 6 of Title 24 Energy Code. There's also a link, Energy Code ACE, I'll get to it further, where you can look at a copy of the whole code digitally and search it. But this is the version of the code that's formatted to be consistent with the rest of the building code in Title 24. And feel free, if there's any questions or anything in the chat, just let me know. But this kind of gives you an idea of why we had the Title 24, or why the energy code part of it in the first place, where you can find it, kind of how it's laid out. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of background on where you can dig deeper into the California Energy Commission that is in charge of Title 24 Part 6 Energy Code, and where you can get a hold of the manuals and all the supporting documentation. So California Energy Commission, energy.ca.gov. They have, within the website, you can go to the core responsibilities fact sheet area and understand more that the California Energy Commission is responsible for energy efficiency in buildings, advancing the state energy policy, developing renewable energy, investing in energy innovation. They oversee our energy infrastructure, and for transforming our transportation sector to be all electric. So there's various links to that, and also an events calendar where you can participate in some of the stakeholder meetings and just listen in on some of their other Energy Commission meetings. The code cycle in California is on a 3-year cycle. The adoption timeline for the 2025 Energy Code actually started in 2022. And right now, we're already working on the Energy Code that will be implemented and be under the 2028 code. So now's the time to get involved with the future code. This summer, you're going to read about what was finally adopted and what the language will be for the 2025 code. And then, as a reminder, that's going to take place January 1st in 2026. When it comes to understanding the energy code a little bit even deeper, there are specific manuals that the California Energy Commission publishes. And these are the books that, like, I use. This is the way I read about the energy code, is I use it in the format that the California Energy Commission publishes. And so they have the standards in one book. They have what's called reference appendices, which gives the background information and other useful resources needed to understand the energy code. And then there's several manuals. Well, one manual is for looking at single-family residential occupancies. The other manual is for non-residential multifamily compliance occupancies. Those two books give you a lot of examples. If you want to really become like a code expert and understand it better, you would read a question. It gives you an answer to it, and also references back to the standards themselves and the appendices. And then there's 2 more manuals on how the state sets forward the ways that you can use energy modeling to model these occupancy types and show energy savings by comparing it to a standard energy budget using computer modeling. So when it comes to understanding the energy code in design and construction, really, we look at this as energy consultants, and what we try and get the architect and the whole development team to understand is that working with the energy code as an integrated approach is better. It identifies issues early and enables efficiencies. Typically, the approach for a lot of design has been a little linear. However, it does mean that at plan check, you would maybe get called out on some things. It has to come back to the team. And because the energy code now is very integrated really with the building itself, it behooves us to do an integrated kind of approach to design. And so what that, what that could look like is that we're looking at what the owner wants, and then the architect and the design team needs to meet part 6 of the energy code and part 11 of that Cal Green Code. They should be looking at it at that time. Then they're going to have plans and specifications that reflect those early decisions. And that part of it could be a bit with the design team and the engineers and working with your construction crew, iterative, but it is an integrated design process. And you'll want to elicit it if you know who the builder's going to be, get some of their feedback. And then for single family homes, there's going to be a verification process involving HERS raters to show that parts of the energy code have been met. If it's a commercial project, you may be involved with a commissioning agent, and also installing contractors and code officials all play their part in this verification and performance testing part of the process. And then really that behooves the owner because they will know that their project complies with the energy code and Cal Green Code. Okay, I think that was like a lot, but also kind of bigger picture context of where that energy code sort of fits in and where some of the resources are. And then we're going to take a closer look into Title 24 itself. And if there's, I can pause for a moment if there's any questions in the chat that haven't been answered by Grant or Andy or anything.
There's one question, I was just answering it. Adam asks if HERS ratings are only for residential. Yes, they are only for residential. Non-residential has what's called acceptance testing, and acceptance testing requires to be completed by a acceptance test technician. The amount of jurisdictions requiring that and following up on that is a little shaky at this point. We found that some are on top of it and some aren't. And in some cases, depending on the test required, they have allowed HERS raters to complete that work. But to answer your question, HERS is only for residential.
And then to make things more fun, in the new code coming up 2026, next year, they're going to get a new acronym. Just put a pin in that. We're going to just stick with 2022 code right now. Okay. Thanks, Grant. When it comes to taking a closer look at Title 24, Part 6, the code itself has 3 kind of compliance terms, 3 buckets that you need to kind of understand and know what the differences are. And one is mandatory requirements. So these are the energy efficiency measures that are applicable to all projects. And there's different set for residential. For example, there's some that apply to all, every occupancy type, but there are some mandatory requirements that are specific to residential, some that are specific to the non-residential, and some specific to multifamily. But that's one bucket, the mandatory. And then there's the prescriptive component package. And this is essentially a checklist approach to showing energy compliance. So there will be certain mandatory requirements that are applicable to this prescriptive component package approach, but basically you follow all the parts of a prescriptive package for that occupancy and for that climate zone. And this kind of prescriptive approach is used to determine what's called a standard or baseline building, which is used under the performance method. And this is your energy modeling approach. So they take that prescriptive component package, they come up with what's now going to be the building your performance approach is going to be compared to. And with the performance approach, there are a number of trade-offs. So if the building is more energy efficient in one aspect, it can trade off less energy efficiency in a different aspect. So as long as the proposed design building can be shown to be more energy efficient than a similar sized standard design building or baseline building, then the building complies. The other thing to know in California, and I kind of alluded to that, is that it's climate zone based. So California has taken the state and looked at a lot of the microclimates and divided the state up into 16 separate climate zones. And just FYI, for those of you who are, we had one person say they were from out of state, you might be used to looking at ASHRAE's climate zones for the whole country. Those climate zones are completely independent and separate of California's climate zones. And so actually for any architect or anybody on the call, that really comes into play, kind of a sidebar, put a pin in this, in some of the assemblies that show up in part 2.5 of Title 24, because oftentimes California uses the ICC code. And so that references both the whole country's code that ASHRAE uses, and it also references the California code, these 16 climate zones. So if you, I think it's a lot to remember if you're brand new to the code, but put a pin in that. And most of all of the energy code is going to be referring to these 16 climate zones. The rest of Title 24 might actually be referring to some of the other climate zones. So just keep that in mind. I mean, other meaning the ASHRAE and the whole US. But anyway, California Energy Commission has an online tool, the Easy Building Climate Zone Finder. Helps you find your climate zone. The other kind of big picture thing about Title 24 Part 6 Energy Code is it has a subchapter organization structure that's a bit different than all the rest of Title 24. And in this substructure, if you're looking at the 2019 code, you would have seen 3 chapters, 7, 8, 9, devoted to low-rise residential, single family. And then you would have had chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6 that refer to everything that's not low-rise residential. So if you have the situation where you need to look up older code cycles, I put this in here for reference. This is the way those codes were organized. But now under the 2022 code, we have pulled out the multifamily residential projects, both low rise and high rise, and given them their own subchapters 10, 11, and 12. So it's organized now a little bit differently with 3 more chapters. So we've got our single family section, still chapter 7, 8, 9, our not residential sections, still chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the multifamily subchapters 10, 11, and 12. And then to make things a little more fun, that was sarcasm, to make things a little more difficult when you're new to the code, is that we often do not refer to the subchapters in the energy code. We refer to the sections. So when we say section 150.0, we're really talking about the mandatory measures for the single family residences. And then we'll talk about section 150.1 specifically for performance and prescriptive new construction, and additions and alterations would be 150.2, for example, under the single family residential heading. Another little put a pin in it. The code coming up, there's been some effort to start to reorganize the energy code in a way that fits with how the rest of Title 24 is organized. They're not going to change it right away, but there are folks currently working on like digital resources where it'll start to show you both ways as they kind of ease into maybe a less complicated, more straightforward way of understanding the energy code. So another little pin to put in it. And this is, you're going to get a copy of the slides. So hopefully this will be useful to you. When you open up subchapter 1, and it's called table 100.0A, it's going to give you an outline. This is the kind of the top half of the page. The next slide has the bottom half of the page, but it's going to show you another way to visually understand where everything is in the code and which standards are applicable. So, you know, far left-hand side, it's going to call out the occupancy types. We've got non-residential and hotel motels, covered processes, signs, etc. Kind of the application that it pertains to, where you would find those mandatory requirements listed by section. Again, it's all by section, not by chapters. Where you would find the prescriptive requirements for that particular application, where you're going to find the performance requirements if you're going with the performance computer model, and additions and alterations for those said occupancy types. Similar thing for the bottom part of that page for your single family situation. And multifamily situation. We're up at the top, the application, mandatory, prescriptive, performance, additions, alterations. And just give you kind of an example to walk through. For single family occupancy, let's say we're interested in taking a look at the envelope. So walls, floor, roofs, windows, all that's part of the envelope. We would go to these sections for the mandatory requirements, and the sections 150.0, there's certain ones that are kind of called out on there, but 150.0 is the mandatory measure section. And we would go to 150.1 A through C for our prescriptive requirements. And what that, using the walls as kind of an example, I created this slide just to kind of lay out as just one part of the code how it's organized. So you would see under mandatory measures, there are, A through R topics that are mandatory. At this juncture, L is not used, but otherwise A through R. And if we take a look at the section C, wall insulation, that's going to start to tell us what's minimally required. But if I want to know more about that, I would need to go to section 150.1, building envelope, and then I would take a look at what the prescriptive measure is, and that's, akin to following a checklist. Similar thing for additions, alterations. If I go into that section of the building code, then prescriptively, I'll be presented with a table that lists out kind of the component package requirements for building envelope. And in this case, if we, for the roofs, walls, that's the part of the chart that I excerpt. Let's say we take a look at climate zone 9, for example, we have a project in Thousand Oaks. Then I would come over here to the walls and specifically above grade walls. And let's say I'm going to take a look at wood framed building. What it's going to tell me is that a wood framed building, climate zone 9 in Thousand Oaks, above grade walls need to have a U factor of 0.048. So this is where, yes, you might be learning about the energy code, but now this is where it dives into, if you were an architect, you probably took your class on heat transfer. If you didn't have a heat transfer class, there are tables that translate this U factor into something that plain English folks could plain English you could understand, which is where you go into these reference appendices and your manual, but you can look up these requirements. And for example, if you had a stud wall 2x4, 16 inches on center, and you had cavity insulation of a certain R value and your cavity type, you may or may not need exterior continuous insulation, but it's going to start listing the U factors. Not exactly in this format, but there are tables in the reference appendices that kind of spell this out. And so really what we're looking at is what U factor for climate zone 9, for example, is going to meet the 0.048 or less. And in this case, the 3 examples at the bottom would meet it: a 2x6 stud wall with either R19 through R23 cavity filled, and you're going to have at least an R5 continuous exterior insulation. And that wall assembly now meets the minimum, not the minimum, the prescriptive, prescriptively required wall assembly if you're going to do your building or your house by the checklist. Now, if you're going to do the performance method, that building, this wall type would be used, and you can trade off, say, the exterior insulation for something else that's more energy efficient. And just to give you kind of a non-res example, and the reason I bring this up is because a lot of folks are shocked on the difference between stud walls and metal walls and what's required, and it also depends on your climate zone. So for example, everything inside the box here, this is what is kind of prescriptively required. And for a prescriptive or baseline metal framed wall, you'd need a 0.055 U factor. That kind of translates into a 24 on center 2x6 metal stud with an R19 cavity, plus an R12 continuous insulation. But if you go to a wood stud wall instead, you could use just 2x4s with an R13. So big difference in the assembly and cost based on kind of the materials. So really, our energy code was trying to pull us away from metal stud walls, which have a lot of thermal bridging. So you can still use them, but to meet that prescriptive, you would, use continuous insulation around the envelope to stop the thermal heat transfer through the metal studs. And then when you change, that's for climate zone 5. When you change to a climate zone like 4, 9, or 16, which we have in our Tri-County region, even the wood stud wall would need to have some continuous insulation prescriptively. And then if you move to climate zone 6 or 7 down by Santa Barbara, considered to be much more mild, you don't even need the R13. You could just use an R11 in a stud wall, for example. So climate zones make a difference. Another kind of piece to this, once you switch to the performance method, the computer programming, computer modeling method, is that there's more than one metric. I had mentioned before, hey, if your baseline building, if your proposed building rather uses less energy than your baseline building, then it passes. But within that sort of broad terms, what we're talking about is energy that is looked at in terms of efficiency, a total energy, and a source energy. The time-dependent TDV energy, it is expressed as energy use per square foot of the building floor area. And it's a number that actually represents the annual energy used in the building, plus the additional amounts of energy that went into delivering energy to the building site. So transmission loss lines, for example. Source energy is another metric that is really trying to represent and kind of capture the impact of carbon emissions on the creation and delivery of that energy used. They're all kind of listed as kBTU per square foot for the year, but it's not an actual number you can translate into electricity use. Although the software can give you that number, the code compliancy part of it is looking at what's called TDV energy and source energy. And then if all of those proposed design use less than the standard design, you pass. Are there any do you have any questions about that, or Grant, any clarifying comments you want to make about this before I go into kind of what it could look like in the software and trade-offs?
No, none right now.
Okay. And so the little computer shot there, I mean, this is what you see as someone who's working with Energy Pro, which is one of the software interfaces you can use. And then the screenshot below is an example in CBEC-COM. And then they CBEC, we also have CBEC Res. So this one here is for a small commercial building example. In this example with the small commercial, you can have performance method trade-offs for that TDV. You're going to have your end uses listed out, and end use, these are the ones that can be traded off, and these are the ones that are regulated under the Title 24 standards. Once you dig into them all deeper, you'll see that space heating and space cooling, the indoor fans associated with the space heating and cooling systems, exhaust fans, etc., could have heat rejection. You're going to have pumps for your water, other miscellaneous pumps, domestic hot water energy use, and indoor lighting. Those are things you can trade off. Exterior lighting is regulated. It's just not something you can trade off under the performance method. Then for kind of extra credits or part of this other part of the total compliance is your required photovoltaics and potentially required battery storage. If you exceed those and you do more PVs, more battery than needed, you can gain a little bit on your compliance as well. So in this case, well, standard design is listed, your proposed design is listed, and then your compliance margin is listed on the output. And we can start to look at this as like energy consultants or your mechanical engineer, whoever you're working with. If you choose not to take it on yourself, that's fine. This is like a whole specialty in and of itself, but we can look at the building design once it's modeled and say, okay, we potentially there's some improvement that needs to be done with the space heating, but the way the project is designed, we're doing better on our space cooling and our indoor fans, and we're doing ever so slightly better on the hot water. And those positives outweigh the negatives. So overall, we are having a positive compliance margin, and now we've met the efficiency part of the TDV. And then we take a look at the total, and we've included positive on our PV and batteries by exceeding the standard slightly. And so now we know that we're doing fine on this building, and we can look for improvements if the building weren't complying. Same kind of thing goes into looking at the trade-offs for source energy. You take a look at our compliance margin. In this case, our source energy had more negative on our heating than positive for our cooling and indoor fans. So if we were to just stop at the efficiency mark for source energy, we would not be in compliance. However, with source energy, it includes the fact that we're making energy on site and that we are having battery storage. And that is overall positive because we added a little more PVs and battery to the system. So now in a whole, we meet our source energy compliance. And that's kind of how those trade-offs work with the small commercial as an example. Any kind of questions about that? And I'm happy to go back. It's kind of a lot if it's the first time you've looked at it, but it also maybe helps to demystify a little bit about what your mechanical engineer is looking at or your energy consultant is looking at when they're trying to take the whole building and look at its performance in terms of how's it doing with the space heating and space cooling, because really that might tie back to what was chosen for the windows. What was the specification on the windows, and were those helping you? Or is more insulation needed? Or perhaps a more energy efficient heating and cooling system to help boost some of those core elements that are regulated by the energy code. And then, is there any questions? Grant, that we can answer? Okay,
No, please send through any questions you have. We're happy to sit here and answer stuff. Anything you need more clarification on.
okay, that's great. And so I want to kind of wrap up with additional resources for you. And there's a number of them, including your code coaches. Grant's one of them. Coming back to the California Energy Commission, energy.ca.gov, those 2022 building energy efficient standards. As a reminder, you can go to that website. They do have an online resource center where you can obtain a lot of the forms, trainings, videos. If you're getting new to the code and working on compliance itself, this is where you're going to find a lot of the prescriptive compliance forms. Also, you're going to have access and be able to download these manuals that we just were reviewing. All 6 of them are there. And there's also going to be a link to the Climate Zone Finder if you're having trouble finding the Climate Zone Finder just on its own. You can also get to it through this page. From the CEC, there is a really great newsletter called The Blueprint. I like this one. I mean, part of what we do is read it, so you don't have to, and then you can attend to some of our classes, but go through here and they often will give you common question and answer and interpretations, and they'll often publish clarifying language on some of the code issues. And it helps to keep the readers up to date on some of the latest concerns that are coming up. So I think it's a good resource and it's pretty high level too. So you can, you're not going to get down into the weeds too much. So if you're new to the code, this might be a way to kind of keep you abreast of what's going on and what is happening and where those issues are that come up that people have a lot of questions on. Then the other resource that's very useful is Energy Code ACE. And with Energy Code ACE, they do have an online searchable resource called the tool, ACE tool. And this is where you can go into Title 24 Part 6. I think they have Title 20 up and running again, and they'll have reference to the res, non-res manuals. They just reformatted the whole website. So if you looked at it several months ago or even last year, if you go on it now, it's going to look a little bit different. But they've tried to make it more searchable, more user-friendly. And it's not formatted like the rest of like that ICC code that we were looking at. This just lists the code and you can scroll through it and then click into the different sections with the links on the left. And then also under their ACE resources, there's fact sheets, trigger sheets, checklists, more. Also, they have contracted with the CEC to provide a lot of the prescriptive forms. So if you want to fill out the Title 24-6 code compliance forms prescriptively, you would go to California Energy Commission. You can find the forms you need, but in some cases it'll link you back to an Energy Code ACE associated website where you can create a like a membership login or user login and keep track of projects that way and actually produce some of the forms needed. For the low-rise residential projects, California has a process for following up on the code compliance during construction, and that involves the HERS rater and Cheers. This at www.cheers.org, and make sure you do put in .org. If you screw up and do .com, you're gonna go to a completely different part of the internet. So cheers.org. They are what's called a HERS provider. So they do training programs and certification of the HERS rater. They are also a holder, a depository of the registries for all the single family residential energy compliance documentation under that performance method will be found here. And this, learning to use this website is kind of another class on its own. But what I want to tell you about this one is that as you go through that process, once you have your Title 24 Part 6 documentation, CF1R it's called, that paper has to be watermarked and signed by the architect or the designer and signed by the energy consultant or the person who produced the documents. It's uploaded. It goes through a process where it's made official, it's watermarked. Then from there, it can be printed, put into the drawing set, but also now your HERS rater, your builder, and the planning and building official can all log on to the website and access that documentation. And then there's a process where the HERS rater has a way to use the HERS forms to show that a particular project met the energy code. And then, as I mentioned, with Title 25, under hcd.ca.gov, building standards, there is a great resource for factory-built housing. And the reason I mention this and the reason it's been coming up a lot is because of the popularity of accessory dwelling units as California is building more and more of that. And also as people are breaking into kind of the factory-built housing market. And one of the questions that comes up for us is, oh, if we're under Title 25, does Title 24 Energy Code apply? And the answer is yes. And actually, all of the construction standards of Title 24, Part 2, Part 2.5, 3, 4, 5, Part 6 Energy Code, and Part 11 Cal Green Code does apply in addition to what's under Title 25. And if you have questions about Title 24, and specifically Part 6 and Part 11, then you can call our Code Coach service or send us an email, and we will be happy to answer any of your questions. And Grant, do we have any questions from folks now? We do have time.
No,
Or
not yet.
Yeah. Okay. And it could be, and actually, I mean, if there's, if it's easier in some cases to just ask the question, or even if you want me to go back to a different slide, I find that if folks are really new to the code, it's kind of a bit overwhelming. And then if you're familiar with parts of it, but not other parts of it, you might have questions. So, don't be shy. Or Grant, if there's anything you could think of that we should address or I'll go into a little bit more.
We just got one from Adam. Do they ever move prescriptive performance components into mandatory requirements? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yes. Is that what you're going to say? Yes.
Yeah, they have.
Yes.
The mandatory measures generally when it comes to like envelope haven't been improved or updated or made more stringent in a while, because all projects still need to comply prescriptively or performance. So what's a good example of one that's become mandatory? Solar stuff. Solar used to be tradable, and now it's just mandatory in new construction, single family. So there are times when they do that.
Yeah, and then even then it's mandatory. I put air quotes around it in that it's virtually impossible to trade it off under the performance method. So you're gonna end up doing the PVs. However, you don't have to do batteries. That's optional and you could get
and
credit.
Yeah, and similar to that, the history of the PVs, couple code cycles ago, they'd give you credit for doing PV that could offset other things. Then that credit went away, and it was just kind of like a minimum amount that you had to do, and then it fully became mandatory on every project. We're seeing that they're following the same pathway with the home battery systems. So, while we were receiving credit, and then they said, hey, you have to prepare for a battery, and now we're anticipating them saying you just have to have a battery in your new construction projects.
Right. So that's often the course it takes over those 3 years. They'll introduce something as completely optional, try it out, let's see if how it helps folks with the extra credit. And because the code cycle is quite well every 3 years, but the process for getting features into the energy code, it takes a number of years to do it. And I forgot to mention that part of how that comes about to get it into the energy code is that every one of these measures has to be proven to be cost effective, looking at that TDV energy, looking at actual like cost of construction, implementation, is it practical? That goes into it as well. And so the whole, all these measures are vetted out to show that they have an overwhelming benefit. And if that can be proven, then it's allowed to be incorporated into the energy code. So like with the solar panels, it was proven to be cost effective. And in the end, save energy, save resources, and not be an undue burden to the homeowner of new construction. And there are exemptions you can also qualify for. But that's how a lot of those come into play.
Adam asked, who is doing that cost-effective analysis?
Folks are contracted to the California Energy Commission, and some is in-house. So I think some of the I think 3C was doing some of it. But I would look it up for you and answer that, or maybe Grant can Google that right now. Different entities over the years have been tasked with providing that analysis. And there's different organizations that are tasked with actually compiling all the specialized TDV metrics per climate zone based on the utility company and that are serving that climate zone and where those energy resources are coming from.
Yeah, we
So I'm
see
not
it
sure.
periodically go out to bid, and there's a small group of firms that bid on those type of jobs for the state. Most recently, we've seen, you might be familiar with a lot of the REACH codes that were trying to require all electric construction in certain jurisdictions. And that, for a variety of reasons, but was kind of in hot water and had a lot of troubles because the smaller jurisdictions not being able to afford the added cost of doing their own cost effectiveness study used the city of Berkeley. So Berkeley foot the bill to do that study and have a subcontractor prepare it. And then once that was under litigation, that cost effectiveness study for Berkeley, it paused temporarily all the jurisdictions that then used that study instead of paying for their own, freezing a lot of REACH codes across the state. So it's a process that's not just used for the energy code, and there's a group of firms that they do it a lot.
Yeah, I'm just blanking on the names of those firms. I should have them at the tip of my tongue, but my head's not into that at the second. Well,
I'm not
yeah.
seeing any other questions coming through right now. We're happy
Okay.
to, Trevor asks, do any of our trainings? Yes, the ZNCD requirement. We do a ZNCD series. It's a 5-part series. We've done it in person in San Luis Obispo. We're actually currently doing it on demand. Let's see which one.
Oh, I
The
think that goes to the next slide right here.
Oh, the fourth one is tomorrow. And then maybe Sarah, you'll have to chime in on, or Danica, on the how much you have to attend, etc., to get your credits. I don't know if you can just jump in for the fourth one and get any credits for it.
Yes, you can. You can take the 4th and 5th one and get those 2, and then you can do other courses. You
Ah.
just need 5 total. You could do each of the ones we're offering independently. And I thought this calendar might include them, but it doesn't. So you'll need to go on to the 3CREN website and look for those courses under
Yep.
the BPT program, correct?
And what are you talking about tomorrow for number 4?
It's going to be, no, it's tomorrow. Is number 4 tomorrow? Really?
Anyways, we have it broken out,
Number
kind of
one,
general HVAC. There you go. I thought it might be a ventilation. We do like a water heater one, an HVAC
yeah.
one, more general other products, I think is the 5th one. And the first one's a big overview of a lot of ZNCD stuff.
That's right. So ventilation and HRV. So in this series, we're more focusing on operational carbon. And then there's other folks who are offering trainings on that are, and I think we have got one class on embodied carbon, just to kind of differentiate that.
Great. Trevor's going to attend tomorrow, so we'll see him there.
Okay, cool. I do one course at a time. This course now, then after we're done, then I'll think about it tomorrow. Okay, Sarah, do you want to take it over?
Yeah. So just in closing, we have continuing education learning units available for this course. We have both AIA and ICC learning units. If you provided your AIA or ICC numbers in the registration form, I have those and I can report attendance for you after confirming that you did attend. But if you need to send me those numbers or that information, my email is there on the screen. We will also be sending out a copy of the slides and a recording so that you can reference this session again. And that will also include a survey. Please take it. It really does help us out with informing how our courses are going and how we can build our calendar. And then I just added a few upcoming courses. I pulled these ones from our calendar. These ones have more of an energy code focus, which is why I did not include the ZNCD ones, but our calendar is a lot more robust and has a lot of other classes available. And we still have a few more minutes, like 13 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them. But if you have another meeting to get to, feel free to sign off because we'll just be answering any potential questions for the remaining of the time. And thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, we're happy to go back to a slide and dive in. I know a lot of those slides are code section heavy, so we're happy to rehash anything specific or their applicability. David's looking for info on the upcoming 2025 changes. You're gonna see a lot of stuff offered for that. It's on its way. We know everyone wants it. It's in the cycle currently, but we're still getting out a lot of our base Title 24 knowledge and stuff that we had prepared over the last codes.
And
So,
I
stay tuned.
will, yes, thanks, Grant. I will add that we have a 6-part series coming up this year that does a deep dive into those 2025 updates based on the focus. So single family, multifamily, like it has like all the different focuses. And I think that kicks off maybe in May. I'm not quite sure. It's on our calendar. But yeah, we will have a deeper dive session coming up.
And I'm sure most people know, but that 2025 code takes effect January 1, 2026. So we will have this. This is going to be a big topic this year, of course. Yes, Laura, I believe the slides are sent out as just slides. So you'll have that.
Yeah. They'll be sent out as a PDF.
Yeah, and when it comes to the 2025 code that's coming up, I alluded to looking at it and how you reference and organized a little differently. So when that resource comes out or when there's more clarity around that with I'll reference and give you screenshots of how like Energy Code ACE, for example, might be showing you can go back and forth between the new format, the old format. I was at a conference in September, October, or KBEC conference. I'm forgetting which month we were there, but there are folks working on that. And so as soon as that's further developed, then we will share that with you all on that formatting for the new code. Also, a lot of the things for energy efficiency in our buildings were kind of implemented under these other energy codes. So a lot of the changes coming up for 2026 won't be as numerous as what we had from 2019 to 2022, for example. So, but we will go through that by occupancy type. So we'll have one session devoted to some non-res changes, another session to the single family, which is also duplexes, low rise, and then changes to the multifamily. And then we'll look at ADUs and additions and alterations for that. Yeah, and then you'll be able to read the code, get a hold of the manual starting this summer. And right now, if you really want to dive into it, you can get a hold of the 2025 code. When you go onto the California Energy Commission website, it's going to be listed as the 15-day language, and there's a couple different links because one of them will link you to the reference appendices. Another part is to the standards. So you'll want to go to both of those 15-day links, and then it goes through and shows you what was underlined as new, what's crossed out is the part removed, and then the existing code. And then you, that way too, you can have a good idea of what the new 2025 code is going to read like compared to how the 2022 code was reading. So if you've got any projects that you know are coming up and going to be permitted under the 2025 code, it's probably a good idea to take a look at those manuals that way with the changes. But that's part of what we're going to help you do, is read the manuals for you and then give you kind of a big picture overview in the trainings, and then kind of help you know what part of the code you need to go to. And of course, we're available as code coaches, free service to anyone on the call, to the general public, to architects, to the engineers, plans examiners, and code officials, and installing contractors. Okay, that. I'll leave that slide up so you can see the websites again and take a look at go to our link to our newsletter. And
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. If there's no other questions, we can go ahead and end it here. And if you think of any questions, we have, again, our Energy Code Coach service. And yeah, thank you all for joining us. And you'll be getting an email with the slides and the recording in the next few days. And thank you, Jennifer and Grant, for a great course. This was our first ECC course of the year, so off to a good start.
You're welcome. And thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, y'all.